discussion. We'll begin with an agenda. We'll start off with just a few moments telling you a bit more about InfoLock Technologies and our role within the Symantec partner community. We'll dive a little bit deeper into the issue of lost and stolen devices and how they continue to be a concern for organizations, in particular as the mobile workforce expands. We'll dive deeper into the components of the Symantec Unified Security Solution and wrap up with the particular business use cases and how they may apply to your organization. My intention is to spend about 45 minutes on the presentation. I know everyone has a busy work schedule and they don't want to take up too much time. Also want to leave some time for any questions that do arise. As Rob mentioned, you could use the chat feature in the webcast to ask me any questions throughout the presentation, or of course I'll provide my contact information at the conclusion of the presentation and we can have an offline discussion about how any of these solutions may need to be explored deeper as it relates to your particular environment. And of course, after the presentation, we'll also send out a copy of the slide deck so you can share that with your organization. So to begin, for those of you who are not familiar, InfoLock Technologies, we're an information security consulting and integration services firm. We're based in Arlington, Virginia, outside of DC. We are a security-focused partner of Symantec with a particular expertise in their data security solutions. So we're a data loss prevention master specialist partner. We've even developed their DLP appliance that is available to their customers. So we certainly know that solution well. And really across the board, whether it's DLP, encryption, mobility, authentication, and numerous other solutions for data and network security. We've been working with them for many years and have a really broad range of customers across all industry verticals across the country, of sizes ranging from smaller organizations all the way through 40, 50,000 user Fortune 500 companies. So we're really very comfortable working in any environment and addressing any particular regulatory concern as it relates to data security. And I certainly like to stress that I like to stress the value add and the value added reseller. We really work with customers throughout the entire sales cycle, helping them evaluate and test these particular solutions, helping them implement them properly and manage them properly over time. So that's a little about us. Getting into the heart of today's topic, it's about protecting our data, protecting the data on our endpoints, and trying to get our arms around the ever-expanding perimeter, or really lack of perimeter these days, with our increasingly mobile workforce, and in particular the concept of BYOD, bring your own device, and how this is, while increasing productivity, increasing employee satisfaction, it is definitely increasing the level of risk as it relates to data security, and it's increasing the likelihood of data breaches. If you look at some of the statistics we'll go through here on this slide, they really tell the story of, to be honest, what is common sense. It's been years since the issue of lost laptops has been around. It's always kind of surprised me a little bit how frequently people are able to lose these fairly large devices. These laptops continue to get lost at coffee shops, at airports, out of the back of cars. And they contain such significant amounts of organizationally sensitive data that it continues to be a major driver in data breaches. But as we all know, laptops really just represent a small component of the mobile device story. It's not unheard of for employees to have a laptop, a smartphone, and a tablet, all of which can access corporate data, corporate information, and all of which can be lost. And the issue that is becoming of an increasing concern, again, is as it relates to BYOD, the concept that this is an employee's device that's accessing corporate resources. It's very easy and it's attractive for IT administration, for the organization, to offload the cost of devices to the employees so they could use the device of their choice and just provide them access to the information that they need to do their job. But when it comes to managing this device, managing the data that's on their device, it's certainly a more difficult challenge. And from a legal standpoint, from a liability standpoint, we're presented with the issue that this is not the organization's device. There's only so much control you can have over something that you do not own, and that's really at the heart of the issue for a lot of organizations. So, quickly looking at some of these statistics, you're seeing nearly 60% of people who admit to storing company-sensitive information on their devices. I stress admit because it's very likely that the data is on most of these devices. It's just employees don't even realize that they have organizationally sensitive data on them. The second part, when you see 40% of employees who again admit to taking sensitive data when they change jobs. This is something that we see over and over again. It isn't necessarily malicious. It's just employees feeling that through their work, through their job, they've earned the right to the information that they've helped develop or create, whether it's a salesperson changing jobs, whether it's a developer or someone in manufacturing changing jobs. They feel that they've worked and added value to the company, and they're allowed to take that information to advance their career at their next stop, and that's how we see a lot of information leave. So seeing a number of 40% of people admitting to doing this is certainly a concern, because you'd expect that number to be even higher. This third one has really been a classic use case of employees sending information to themselves so they could work on it at home. That's that classic example of an employee doing what they believe is in the best interest of the company in order to work at home after hours to get more work done, but it certainly presents a risk of losing this information as this data has now spread to multiple devices, and it's devices that are outside the control of the organization. And then finally, this is certainly probably the latest issue of using file sharing technology. Cloud apps such as Dropbox and the numerous other document sharing applications that are out there for employees to upload information and then access it from another location, from home or from a remote site. And they're now again extending that perimeter, and it's very, very difficult to control. We see a lot of organizations use things like web filtering technologies to limit which applications can be used. There may be a policy that says we're not allowed to use Dropbox for this particular function, but it's really difficult for an organization to keep their arms around how many of these apps are actually available. How many different cloud sharing apps are available to employees? Is it dozens? Is it hundreds? And what's going to be available for tomorrow? So the idea of either whitelisting or blacklisting these applications isn't really a workable solution. So as I mentioned about the lost or stolen device, it continues to be an issue. With these statistics here on this slide, really, when you net it all out, it's just highlighting the fact or stressing the fact that these devices continue to get lost, and because of the amount of sensitive information that can be easily stored on them, they result in more costly data breaches. The average cost of a data breach as a result of a device is more than other types of breaches or network penetrations. So figuring out a way to get our arms around our laptops, removable storage devices, and other external storage devices, smartphones, tablets, it's a lot to get our arms around, and we need ways in which to focus at times less on the device itself, although that is critical, but also on the data that's being placed on them, so we could be a little bit more targeted in how we protect our organization's data. So that's a little bit of a backdrop. It's not news to us that data breaches are prevalent and they're costly. I guess it's a bit of a sad story that there's enough data breaches out there and they happen so routinely that they're actually easily quantifiable these days. So we're looking at nearly $6 million for the average data breach in terms of the cost of the organization, the loss of intellectual property, the cost of remediation. It's quantifiable and it's significant, and it's one of those, you hear it often. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And that may or may not be true. It hasn't happened to everybody, which means there's things that can be done to protect your organization and reduce the likelihood of this happening to your organization. So as it relates to what Symantec can do for you, Symantec's unified security solution, and what exactly does that mean? What exactly does it entail? And you're probably not surprised to know there's not one single solution that is all things to all people, not one single solution that is a silver bullet and will protect your data and your devices no matter what. So it's important that we layer in technology, the idea of defense in depth or layered security, so we could use multiple solutions to attack what is a very large and complex problem. But what is critical, and it's really kind of the heart of today's discussion, is to provide an organization with solutions that can integrate with one another. That when we say multi-layer, they actually are. There's interconnectivity and integration points between these solutions to allow you to more effectively manage the data security issue that we're trying to address. So what's involved in our unified security? What are the different components, the different products involved that Symantec is offering its customer base? And while there's some more than this, the three key ones that we want to address in today's conversation are these three: data loss prevention, encryption, and mobility. So with data loss prevention, it's the idea of providing an enterprise-wide, content-aware, policy-driven solution that's going to help you locate and monitor your sensitive data. So it's content awareness of the data itself as it is used and moves throughout the enterprise. So that's number one. Number two, the idea of encryption. This is technology that's been out there for many, many years. There's still a surprising number of organizations who have not implemented basic encryption technology, so there's still an opportunity for organizations to do more to protect their organization. But we'll look at what Symantec provides in terms of an encryption portfolio that could help your organization protect its data in numerous ways. And then finally taking a look at what Symantec is now offering in terms of mobility. And this is certainly a newer addition and a newer focus of Symantec, is to take its security technology and to take some unique features in the market to help us protect the information that's on our mobile devices. So we'll dive into each of these three. We'll stay fairly high level and won't get too technical with these three solution suites. My objective here today is to make sure you understand that first and foremost, these solutions exist and are out there and are frequently implemented successfully today, in the hopes that we could have some follow-on conversations specific to your organization at a more detailed technical level, including discussions on how they actually get implemented. But to roll right into it, topic number one, again, data loss prevention. As I mentioned before, content-aware, policy-driven solution that is enterprise-wide. I stress enterprise-wide because something that you'll see frequently, the term DLP, or data loss prevention, is a term that is used often by many vendors, and what you'll often see are what I'll refer to as point solutions for content inspection. So a common case may be your email gateway may have content inspection capabilities, so we can inspect email messages, but it's obviously limited to that particular protocol, and that's the only visibility you have. Or you may have your endpoint protection solution may have some basic content inspection capabilities, and it will do that level of inspection on the endpoint. But they're not unified and they're not enterprise-wide. So what Symantec is offering is a solution that, what I like to say, covers three buckets, which is data in motion, data at rest, and data at the endpoint. So in motion, monitoring all of your network protocols, monitoring all of your egress traffic. whether it's email or web traffic or some of the other protocols we'll discuss, monitoring all that communications to see whether or not sensitive information is leaving the organization. Data at rest, executing scans on your data repositories, your file servers, databases to see whether or not sensitive data is being stored in places where it shouldn't be. And then at the endpoint level, which endpoints have sensitive data on them? Is sensitive data being moved to external storage? Are remote users trying to send sensitive information via email or web posts when they're off network? Symantec DLP has the ability to provide protection and coverage for these three vectors. And then, of course, now we're also providing protection for your mobile devices as well as the data that's being sent up to cloud applications. So, sticking on the DLP topic, I think it's helpful to go through a bit of a workflow to get a better idea of how this works in practice. So what we begin with when the solution is initially installed, you're working with a central management console that out of the box provides 60 some odd policy templates that you're able to customize to suit your organization. From a detection standpoint, you really can look for anything it is you're trying to protect. But if we go with a basic example of, let's say, credit card data, where an organization is trying to prevent the disclosure of credit card information, so that's the policy that we enable. From a regulatory standpoint, perhaps the driver is PCI compliance, and that's what we're using here. It could be HIPAA, it could be state data privacy, or any sort of regulatory requirement or internal requirement that you have for data protection. So we enable that policy, and then we begin by scanning our data repositories, what I said, data at rest discovery. So the common use case here may be your file servers. You may have a policy in place that is telling your staff that you're not allowed to save this particular, any credit card data on their personal drives or the public shares or anywhere where you feel access controls are a little bit too promiscuous, so sensitive data cannot be stored there. So that may be a paper policy you have, but now with Symantec DLP, you can actually validate whether or not the policy is being followed. Are there any files containing credit card data stored in these locations? And if there are, let's provide remediation to clean that up. This data discovery can also be pushed out to the endpoint itself. Give me a list of all of the endpoints that have sensitive data on them, so I can ensure that those endpoints are encrypted or protected. So that type of data at rest discovery gives you that information. We take that same policy that we've enabled in the management console, and we're also pushing it out for a data in motion monitoring concept. So we're looking at all the network protocols that are leaving the organization and looking for messages that are being sent that have this credit card information per the policy we enabled. So the information could be in the body of a message, it could be in files attached to messages, it could be your SMTP traffic, it could be your web traffic. Any and all protocols, we're monitoring the movement of that data and telling you whether or not sensitive information is being disclosed. Again, just like the discovery component, this monitoring component is both at the network level and at the endpoint level. So any of the online users who are logged into the network, we're inspecting all that traffic at the network level. For any users that are remote, we are inspecting them at the endpoint level. We're also looking for the way information may bleed onto removable storage devices or being sent to other locations that way. So we're monitoring the movement of data, and then finally we're layering in protection. We'll dive into this in another slide or two for the incident response available to you, but that's really at the heart of what the Symantec solution is able to provide your organization, detailed incident response that could be automated depending on the context of the incident. Who sent what file to whom, how severe is the incident, what is our response? Are we going to block the message from even being sent? Are we just going to monitor it and alert, notify an incident responder or a manager? Are we just going to inform the user that they just did something that they shouldn't have done and refer them to a particular policy that's in place. A whole host of different response rules that you could create to either train your employees to not do that behavior again or to actually block the disclosure of that information. From a data at rest standpoint, if we identify information that's stored in a data repository that shouldn't be there, that file that's been saved on the user's share on the file server, we run a scan, we see that file, we could actually quarantine that data. Take that file that has that credit card information we're looking for, place it into a secure location, and leave a tombstone, a marker behind so the employee knows that their data has been moved. It's a fantastic training tool, and it's obviously a fantastic security tool. And then finally, wrapping this all up, is the idea of reporting, useful reporting. Not just to an IT administrator or a DLP application administrator, but to the incident response teams, to the executive level of your organization. What is our current risk profile? How is our risk trending over time? Hopefully that's going down. Which business units are the higher risk business units? Which ones have broken business processes? By looking at the types of incidents that occur, what can we do to change those business processes? Who are the high-risk users, all sorts of customized reports that are designed to be digestible by non-IT folks so they could participate in the reduction of risk of your organization. So again, DLP is not just about content awareness, it's not just about data detection, it's about incident response and organizational risk reduction. There's certain things also that make the Symantec solution stand out from a competitive standpoint in the DLP landscape. As an aside, it's not a marketing slide I have up here, but the Symantec DLP solution, it's now 8 years running that it's been the leader, the top right quadrant of Gartner's Magic Quadrant for content-aware DLP solutions. So it's been out the longest. It's the most battle-tested. It's the most commonly implemented across industry verticals and across company sizes. So it's definitely a battle-tested solution, and one of the reasons, again, is the coverage, the idea of what I was saying before, data in motion, data at rest, and data at the endpoint. Full coverage of all protocols, the ability to scan all types of data repositories, whether it's the file server example I mentioned before, or whether it's your databases, SQL, Oracle, etc., web servers. SharePoint is a very common use case where we're scanning SharePoint to make sure users are not storing information to either a publicly accessible or heavily accessible portion of the SharePoint site, making sure that information is not there. So really broad coverage from a data at rest standpoint, and again at the endpoint level. Everything from monitoring offline users, whether they're sending emails or web posts, whether we're looking at the ports and peripherals, so people are not sending information to thumb drives, they're not sending information to fax machines or printers that they should not be using. So it's broad coverage on or off network. And again, as you can see from this slide, the idea of it all being managed centrally, unified policy, unified management. From a detection standpoint, too, this is yet another thing that really stands out for Symantec. I'll go over this briefly. The first column, describe content matching, is what you'd probably expect from a DLP solution, a content-aware solution. It's the idea of using regular expressions, going to be these basic algorithms that may look for credit card numbers or social security numbers, but it's also lexicons and keywords, so we could, just as it sounds like, we're describing the data we're looking for. It's a very common use case, especially from an intellectual property standpoint, to use particular keywords and to see if any documents or messages have those keywords in it. So that's common DLP technology that we're able to utilize to describe the content that we're looking for. One of the things that sets Symantec's methodology apart is its ability to tune and customize these properly. So we're very focused on the type of data we're looking for. We are factoring out what we call false positives. We are layering in exceptions, so we're really honed in on the type of data that we're looking for. So we're really accurate from that standpoint. But what we're able to do to take this to another level is these next two columns, which is kind of this concept of fingerprinting data. So column number 2, exact data matching, is the idea of taking an extract of a database, looking at structured data, data that you own. If we go back to this credit card example, it's a database with customers, their associated credit card number, their addresses, and any other personal data. We're able to extract the information from the relevant columns to us that create a potential incident, and that becomes our policy. This is important here because now we're not looking for what we believe to be a credit card number or somebody's credit card number. We're now looking for the exact credit card numbers that are in our possession, that are in our database, so we could protect them from being lost. So really powerful technology there. That same concept then brought forward into unstructured data. Taking fingerprints, it's basically hashing documents, office files like Word and Excel and PDF, fingerprinting them and having a policy set to look for that information. This is an extremely powerful tool because unlike if you're familiar with information or digital rights management where you're tagging specific files, what's important here is we are essentially tagging or fingerprinting the data, not necessarily the file. The reason that's important is because it's very difficult for an organization to keep their arms around how often data is created, newly created data, or versions of copies of existing data. If you're only focused on the specific file, it's hard for you to keep track of whether or not other files with that same information exist. So with DLP, we fingerprint the content. So if you take the example of a 3-page Word document, we fingerprint that file. If a user tries to take the first couple paragraphs out of that document and paste it into the body of an email or save it as a PDF file or a text file, we'll actually recognize that and be able to capture that as an incident because we're focused on the data within that original file. Really powerful stuff, really powerful technology. And this fourth one is probably a little bit more advanced. It's something organizations tend to get into further down the line. Is the idea of training the DLP tool with examples of sensitive, unstructured data so we can train it to look for newly created data and see it that way. So it's kind of an advanced technique on the index document managing. So as I mentioned before, detection is great. I mean, it's something, certainly Symantec can be proud of and its ability to accurately detect data, but I really like to point out what we can do that other solutions can't, and it's all about incident response. It's all about workflow, and this is really where Symantec sets itself apart. It's all well and good that you could detect an incident, but if you don't have a meaningful, reasonable way to respond to that incident, a DLP solution just kind of breaks. It's not workable if a user has to administrator has to log in and review every single incident that was created, every single file or message that had a credit card number, look at that to determine whether or not it was a false positive and who should be the person who should respond to that. With Symantec DLP, we're able to automate so many aspects of incident response to make it a workable solution for the organization. So since we can understand the context of an incident, who sent the file, who did they send it to, what was contained in that file, and therefore how severe was it, what department are they in, how does this correlate to other policies this user may have broken, all part of our contextual analysis to determine what happens next. Can it, based on the user's department, if it's someone in finance or someone in human resources who created that incident, well, it's their manager who should be a responder, not just the IT administrator who's been tasked with implementing DLP. It's a key part of automating the response rules. The right person, just like I said, route the incidents to the right responder. Whoever created the incident, someone who's in that role of managing that person should respond to it. The right order, let's make sure we're focused on the high severity incidents first and react to them immediately, and let's have a process in place for reviewing lower severity incidents. the right information. See, when we pull up the incident response screen, when we log into the console and review an incident, we should be able to determine within 5 seconds the context of the incident and what should happen next, which again bleeds into the right action here. A tool that gives you the ability to point and click so you could move it up the chain of incident response. Escalate it, dismiss it, or resolve that incident at the click of a button. And then finally, as I mentioned before, the right metrics, having a tool that is going to provide meaningful reports for your non-technical personnel to review to determine whether or not this DLP solution is adding value, whether or not the organization is reducing its risk over time. So really important stuff from an incident response and workflow standpoint. To touch upon the components of DLP real quick, there's quite a bit here, but I really wanted to highlight, again, the fact that it's a centrally managed solution. It could cover all of these different threat vectors, but we also realize there's a lot going on here, and organizations, either for financial reasons, budget reasons, or human resource constraints, don't have the ability to implement all the different components of DLP, and that's fine because it's one central management platform with these different modules that effectively plug into it. You can begin with certain components. So a common example may be, network discover is that data at rest discovery. Network monitor, the top right, is data in motion monitoring, not blocking, just monitoring. Organizations may implement those two just to assess the level of risk involved, to be able to monitor and understand what are the business processes that are generating incidents and what can be done to change those business practices to reduce risk. So that's an example of how you could do this in a modular fashion and still get a lot of value out of it. And then over time layering in, for example, prevent for email or prevent for web, so you could start to block messages. And then layer in the endpoint agent, so you could do your data at rest discovery at the endpoint level, so you could monitor the movement of information. So a modular solution gives you a bit more control in how you attack your DLP project. Something we'll jump into a little bit more in subsequent slides, especially as it relates to mobility, is we have now the capability to inspect the data that's being sent to smartphones and tablets to really leverage DLP and its content awareness to protect these easily lost devices. So we're focused on the data that's being sent, placed on these devices, and hopefully keeping them clean, so to speak. The one component of this platform I haven't touched upon, if you see to the left, data insight. So everything about DLP that I've been talking about so far is all about content awareness. What is in the file, what is in the message. Data insight isn't focused on the content, it's actually focused on access to the data. Who has access to particular files, to particular directories, who has been accessing them most frequently. So you're actually monitoring file activity, file access activity. This is a huge security tool because it could tell you, again, who's the true owner of the data. It could tell you, entitlements. Quickly run a report that can show you, for your auditors, who has access to this data. So really great security implications there. But data insight also can provide just general data management functions. It can tell you how old, if no one's been accessing data for the last 12 months, it's obviously aged data, and it can be removed from your primary storage and archived to secondary storage. So we have that type of data management capability with it as well. So a really neat addition to the DLP portfolio that a lot of our customers are taking advantage of. So I mentioned this real quick. Again, this is almost summarizes this issue. We obviously understand that tablets and smartphones, they're here to stay. They're only going to become more common, and the apps that individuals are using to access data are becoming more frequent. There's more of them. They're more commonly used, and in order to get the most out of these apps and these devices and make our employees more productive, we have to provide them with the data they need to do their jobs. So we're seeing sensitive information being sent to these devices or accessed from these devices, and most organizations just don't have visibility into it. Whether it's through ActiveSync or any other technology, it's just very easy for organizations to just say, okay, bring your own device. We'll let you securely sync to our environment, but from there you're downloading information that we may no longer have visibility into. And oh, by the way, it's not even our device, it's yours, so if you leave, there's really nothing we could do about it. So it's a major challenge for a lot of organizations. So by using the DLP technology to ensure that any tablet or smartphone user is accessing the network in order to access their data, and gives us visibility into what they're trying to download to these devices, and of course prevent whether or not certain information could be stored there. It provides a great level of control over what's on those devices and then what gets sent to these third-party apps through these devices. So, monitoring what gets sent to the devices, preventing what can be sent to third-party apps. It's a really great integration point with DLP in your mobile devices. So that was the longest section. So don't worry, since we're only on number 2 right now. But I do want to highlight encryption. So it's been around for years, as you all know, and many organizations have implemented it. As I mentioned before, there's still plenty that haven't. What's important that Symantec offers is, much like with DLP, it offers a unified management infrastructure to implement multiple encryption technologies. So for example, at the storage level, Symantec offers file share encryption, the ability to encrypt data that's stored on your network shares, and securely share that among groups or particular users. So access control on encrypted data that's stored on the network level. All the way to the right, to the network component, an email encryption solution, so data that's being sent to third parties is sent securely, it's encrypted, and can be retrieved securely. So email encryption, file and network storage encryption. At the heart of the endpoint and device issue that we're talking about today, of course, we're looking at drive encryption or whole disk encryption and removable storage encryption, making sure information that gets sent to removable storage devices is also protected. So we have these 4 different products that actually integrate into one management console, which, as you can imagine, from a management standpoint, offers numerous benefits. So, much like with DLP, this gives you the opportunity to create a unified set of policies because there'll be directory integration. We could treat different groups of users differently in terms of the level of security that's placed on them. We can implement disk encryption for some users. We can implement email encryption for others, and you can really be a bit more targeted and focused about how you manage your encryption implementation based on the product and the user. Obviously, we're going to be deploying through this console and managing the users from this console, so that's a huge time and cost savings there. Centrally managed policies, centralized key management, so you don't have to worry about issuing and revoking encryption keys and managing that aspect of it. We really try to make this as, for lack of a better word, as dumbed down as possible, so it's easy to implement encryption. And by having a unified management console, really kind of gets to the heart of it, the issue for a lot of organizations, which is maintaining compliance. So you could easily run a report that will tell you whether or not messages were sent encrypted, or whether or not endpoints were encrypted at the time they were lost, or whether or not information was encrypted onto a removable device. Having that layer of reporting that you could share, kind of provide that safe harbor if a device is ever lost, is critical, and that's what this management infrastructure is going to provide. And finally, just as an aside, for any endpoint protection SEP customers that may be on the call, you may be familiar with Protection Center, and this is Symantec's single pane of glass, if you will, for visibility and management of all the different endpoint technologies. So Protection Center can show you which workstations have the SEP installed, which have encryption, which have the DLP agent, and on, any of the Symantec agent technologies, you have visibility into who has them installed, and you could correlate incidents accordingly. So it's a really neat technology that you could use. The drive encryption, I think everyone's probably familiar with drive encryption is all about, so I'll go through this quickly, but one thing you may or may not be familiar with is Symantec acquired PGP several years ago. That's where they got a lot of their encryption technology from. So PGP has been in the marketplace perhaps longer than anybody, so it's certainly a mature, battle-tested solution. It has a comprehensive multi-platform coverage, so if you're what most environments are these days, which is a hybrid environment of Windows and Mac machines, we have no problem providing coverage for those operating systems. We could silently deploy this to eliminate user interaction with the technology. We could throttle the deployment, so we're not impacting end user performance while the deployment is going on. I mentioned the safe harbor issue before, of course, since we're going to be able to report on which devices have been encrypted, and also, of course, prevent that unauthorized access. It's not going to matter if somebody rips the drive out of the laptop after they steal it and mount it to another drive. They're not going to be able to access that data. We'll be able to protect it. So it's a robust, easily managed encryption solution that, again, has been in the market for a long, long time. And we're able to offer that now to our customers. What we're also able to layer in, as I mentioned before, is the idea of removable storage encryption, where we can encrypt files that get placed on external drives. So whether it's a USB thumb drive, whether it's actual external storage mounted via USB, as the data gets placed on that, the agent that's on the user's workstation can encrypt that data so it is protected. It's for most organizations, they want to limit the use of removable storage devices because they understand the security threat that it poses, how easy it is to put just significant volumes of data on these cheap storage devices, and how easy it is to lose them and misplace them. So we want to protect them as best we can, and that's what we're able to do. From a usability and ability standpoint, the one thing that's great about the Symantec solution is that we're able to access this encrypted data offline, if you will. We're able to access it on third-party machines. So if I'm on my work my work computer with my encryption client on my workstation, I place information onto my thumb drive, I encrypt it, and then I take that thumb drive home. It's obviously encrypted in transit. So if I lose it, it's protected. But when I get home and I input that drive into my home machine that does not have any software installed, I'm actually able to input a password that I've created to decrypt that device and use it, and then actually store it back or save it back to that device encrypted with any changes I've made being encrypted. So that offline access, that access utility that doesn't require the software to be on these third-party machines is incredibly useful. And it'll work on both Windows and Mac machines. So a really neat, useful solution that's easily deployed and managed. So what's great about these products, as I mentioned at the top of the hour, is the idea of integrating these two solutions. And there's multiple ways in which we could do it. So at the network level, we can use DLP to do content inspection to determine whether or not a message is sensitive and should therefore be encrypted. One of the issues with encryption, whether it's email encryption or removable storage encryption, is that typically we're leaving the decision in the user's hands whether or not to encrypt data. When leaving anything in the user's hands obviously runs risks, whether it's lack of interest in taking that step to protect the data, whether it's a lack of awareness or simply they forgot to do it. If it's up to the user to make that decision, very often messages or files get moved in the clear without protection. So DLP is able to take that decision process out of the user's hands. Its ability to inspect data and determine whether or not it's sensitive, and then invoke this encryption technology to perform its function and protect that data. So a user sends an email, DLP notices that there's credit card data in that email, it flags that message, routes to the email encryption gateway, which encrypts the message and sends it to its user. So a really great use case there. At the storage level, how I mentioned that network discover capability, data at rest discovery. Well, it scans a data repository, it sees information on a file server that should be protected because it has sensitive information. Well, it invokes the PGP encryption technology, the network file share technology, to encrypt that data at rest and apply that protection. And then finally, at the endpoint level, the removable storage integration is understanding that a user has placed, is taking sensitive information, a sensitive document, and placing it onto that removable media. You can block that, of course, but if it is a situation where it is an authorized user taking information that they need to share with a third party, well, okay, we'll let them do it, but we'll do it securely, so we invoke the removable storage encryption solution and protect that data. The other integration point too with the endpoint DLP solution can tell you whether or not there is any sensitive data at all. It's almost like inventory scanning. Is there sensitive data on these workstations? And if there is, let's correlate that. Is that endpoint encrypted? If it's not, let's go ahead and quickly get that encrypted. So again, we remain in compliance, we maintain our protection. So a really neat integration story between those two products. So the third one that we wanted to discuss quickly is the mobility suite that we now offer. And as you'll see, it's yet another suite of solutions that has multiple components to it, and we'll talk about each one briefly. First, we'll talk about, so what we'll talk about is mobile device management, so MDM, a commonly heard term I'm sure you're all familiar with, which Symantec offers. But then we'll talk more about what we call MAM, application management. So at the app level, providing security there, and then also layering in Symantec's powerful malware detection technology, putting that on your mobile devices as well. So these three components comprising our mobility suite. So with device management, again, this is certainly a solution category, if you will, that's been available for some time. There's quite a few players in the market. It's certainly a little bit crowded. So whether it's solutions like AirWatch or Good or Mobile Iron, there's quite a few out there that have a really long list of features, bells and whistles, and the Symantec solution, of course, does as well. But we like to keep it pretty simple, because one of the things I will tell you from experience is that for most organizations, when it comes to mobile device management, while they may have a variety of features available to them, they're really only using a few core components of that to provide the most basic level of protection to those devices. So, again, looking at this, that first, visibility and control, where are my devices? Are they still in my user's possession? So we want to monitor that. Do I have the ability to enforce password protection? Making sure that users are securely authenticating those devices. Do I want to mandate that they access my network via VPN channel, so it's a protected channel when they're connecting to the network? Locking a device that may be lost, wiping that device. These are obviously all components of the Symantec solution and any MDM solution, and this is what organizations are typically using MDM for, kind of that basic device control, the ability to wipe the device when it's lost, the ability to report on the location of devices and provide compliance reporting and meet these security requirements. This is what we're really focused on. So Symantec has a great solution for this. It's a cloud solution, so the management infrastructure is actually in the cloud. You could do your provisioning from the cloud. There's a very easy self-service component of this, so users are able to very quickly download the app from the App Store or whether it's their iOS device or Android device, and they're up and running, and it's very easy from a deployment standpoint. So that's the device management component, what I would consider to be very basic technology. Where Symantec has now set itself apart from a security standpoint, from a mobile security standpoint, is this aspect, application management. So what we've realized is that these days, while it's critical to protect our devices, it's really the data that's at the issue here. How are we going to protect our data? We use DLP to make sure only information that needs to be on these devices is there, and if sensitive information shouldn't be, let's go ahead and make sure it's not. When we're in a situation where sensitive data has to be accessed on these devices, let's go ahead and protect that. So what we're doing is targeting the apps specifically and wrapping them with security policy management, so that particular app is protected. So again, this is huge in the BYOD environment when someone brings their iPhone in, so you don't have to pay for their iPhone, you sync it up to your network, but you're only going to serve up data, corporate data, to authorized apps, and you're going to protect those apps. So the use case here might be you'll issue or let them provision to them your mail app, which comes with our solution. So it's a secure mail app, so you're not letting them sync using their iOS mail app to your Exchange server and download all their mail that way. You're actually doing it with your secure app. So they still have their Yahoo and Gmail through their mail app, and you don't touch that, you don't see it, you don't care what's going on there. But for corporate email, it's going through your containerized app that is encrypted, and you're not letting information from that app bleed. So they can't copy and paste information out of that app into another one because you have security controls in place. If your organization uses Salesforce or some other CRM solution that has customer information in it, you are issuing that app, and you're wrapping that app so it's secure, and users cannot copy and paste information out of that particular app. It's within your control. So you really, by going at the app level, we're able to differentiate what is corporate data from what is personal data and secure it accordingly. Because it's containerized, because we've created our own, basically organizations create their own little app store. It might only have a few apps in it. Larger organizations may have dozens in it. They provision these apps to the users. You're telling your users, go ahead, bring your device in, that's fine. But if you want to use these apps to access corporate information, go ahead and download them from our app store, agree to the security parameters we have in place, and you're good to go. If that user loses that device, you're not wiping the device, and they don't lose their photos and everything else that they may complain about. You're only wiping the apps that are important to you. So it's a really interesting, important strategy from a device management standpoint, and it's something that's really popular among our customers these days. And the third component of it, again, is just taking something that you'd imagine Symantec would do based on who they are as a security organization, and it's just protecting your device from malware as well. It's becoming more and more common that there's malware written specifically for devices, and we're providing that level of malware protection on the device. So as I mentioned before, I was going to go through some use cases, and you can probably imagine some very common examples of how these three solutions are going to help an organization. This particular case is a financial services firm where they may have auditors or staff members who are working with clients. So they're going to client sites with devices. Like I said before, it's very common for this particular auditor to go with a laptop, their own smartphone, and maybe even a tablet. They got them all laid out on their desk, and they're doing their job, and they're accessing information, or trying to, with all three devices. They may have both corporate sensitive information. They also may have client sensitive information on these devices. And if they're lost, it's obviously a major issue for the firm. So as we talked about before, DLP, because it's content aware, can tell you whether or not there's sensitive information on that device in the first place. Or hopefully, if it's been on there long enough and it was a clean system, prevent sensitive information from being on that device. Now maybe this user has to use or has to store some client-specific data on this laptop. Okay, that's fine. Let's make sure it's encrypted, so if it's lost, it's protected. Let's make sure from a mobility standpoint, when they're at this client site and they try and access corporate resources, they're doing it securely and they can't download company-sensitive information to these devices while they're offline. So that's one example. More from an intellectual property standpoint, you see this a lot. For tech manufacturing or maybe software development, your engineers and other producers at these technology firms, they may be going to client sites, manufacturing plants, or different offices. They're often traveling, again, with multiple devices, and they have company-sensitive information on them. The intellectual property issue is huge for so many organizations, so having a way to either prevent it from being placed onto a thumb drive, to have a way to encrypt it if it does need to be placed on these external devices is important. So we see this in a lot of use cases. I mentioned before, a lot of people have that idea of feeling entitled to the data that they worked on. You see it very often where an employee who's worked on a particular project feels they're entitled to take that information to their next job, so they try to take intellectual property that they're easily accessing from their laptop and they try to save it to a thumb drive. We want to make sure DLP is preventing that action from occurring. So it's a really neat tool to protect the data from that standpoint. Healthcare is a vertical that we spend a lot of time in for compliance reasons, obviously. But this industry vertical as a whole, though, is also dealing with a lot of different challenges. Dealing with doctors and providers, it can be challenging, and it's certainly an industry that has adopted tablets and other devices more readily than others. So we have these difficult heterogeneous environments that we need to protect, and we need a solution to be able to do that. Obviously, PHI is probably the most valuable information that is to be stolen, if you will. It's much more valuable than credit card data, so it's a really high-profile target these days. And as we see this data being accessed or stored on all these different devices, we need a way to protect it. So as you can imagine, again, DLP can be used to prevent it from being placed on these devices in the first place. Encryption can be used to protect it when it's at rest and provide an organization with safe harbor. But then mobility can be used in a targeted fashion to ensure that these apps that the organization is using are protected and have a higher level of security wrapped around them to prevent that data loss. So these cases could go on and on. We've done over the years. It's not a surprise, I would say, to understand that we've done most of our work with financial services and healthcare because of the regulatory environment that both organizations are in, or those industry verticals are part of. But really, these days, every organization has a use case for data protection, and we've seen that with our customer base. Whether it's law firms with intellectual property protection angle, whether it's the manufacturing or high-tech firms protecting intellectual property, source code, things of that nature, and really anything and everything in between. If you have data, chances are there's a reason for someone to steal it from you, whether it's an internal theft or an external theft. People want your information, and we need to have better control and just make it a little bit more difficult for them to take it. And I think that's what Symantec's solutions, properly implemented, really help organizations to do. So just to conclude with this, it just wraps up what I really began with, and it's this concept of the mobile workforce and the BYOD strategy. These are trends that are here to stay, and if anything, they'll proliferate. The device, no one's really as popular as Apple is. They aren't exactly truly winning the device war just yet. There's so many devices that are available to our staff, so we have to address heterogeneous devices, and we'll have to continue to do so. Laptops aren't going away, so we're still going to have the issue of dealing with multiple devices per user and needing a strategy to control the data that's on them. And we need something that's unified, that's centrally managed, that is essentially deployable and manageable. It's not enough for a technologist to be powerful and unique. It has to be able to be easily implemented and easily managed, because most organizations run with a pretty lean department from a security standpoint, and we really feel that that's what we offer with these solutions, is something that properly implemented can be reasonably managed by a lean staff. And that's definitely a conversation I'd love to have with each and every one of you as a follow-up, is to talk a little bit more specific about your particular challenges, to talk a little bit more specifically about how an actual deployment looks, so you have a better sense of what will be required of your organization. So that is what I wanted to cover today. I went over by 2 minutes, so I apologize for that, but I really appreciate everyone for joining today's webcast. I hope you found it useful. As I mentioned at the top of the hour, we're going to go ahead and email copies of the slides to all the attendees, and if you have any questions, you could certainly follow up with me, and I'll be happy to schedule conversations to discuss further. So again, thank you very much. I hope you enjoy the rest of the afternoon, and I look forward to speaking with you. Thank you.